This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When it comes to websites, online stores, etc., there's no place to build a beautiful online presence like Squarespace. And also, I have an Indiegogo campaign going for a short film I'm trying to shoot, and we're so close to hitting the goal. Make sure to check that out. Okay, video time. Technology and filmmaking, to a certain extent, have never had a great relationship, have they? The first movie you might think about could be the Emoji Movie or something, a global embarrassment about emojis that aged like milk before it even hit theaters. I mean, if you're gonna make a movie about technology or about internet trends, you gotta be like really good and also really lucky, as most trends swift by within days and center mostly around technology that is constantly updating. This is such an interesting shift, mostly because it's so new and a lot of filmmakers just have no clue what they're doing. A film is most likely going to take months, sometimes years to produce and eventually be distributed. By then your subject is probably going to be dated and be a period piece in the worst way. It was probably dated before you started shooting, if we're being honest. Just look at that cringy Ansel movie from a few years ago that I talked about on that video that's now deleted. And that's especially the case with influencer culture. It seems like no movie has been able to properly capture the absurdism of influencer culture in a way that can toe the line of being self-aware so as to not disrespect the subject, but also properly and comprehensively understand the subject as well. And now we have this new one, and it's called Mainstream, and we're gonna see if it does that. Mainstream is this new film directed by Gia Coppola, starring Andrew Garfield, Maya Hawke, and Nat Wolff from the Naked Brothers band. It's about a girl named Frankie who lives in Hollywood and wants to be famous or successful. She works at a comedy club with her pal Jake, played by Nat Wolff, where she's pretty much just used for bottom of the barrel type shit, like literally dressing up as a baby on stage for people's entertainment. But then she gets lucky when she meets Link, aka No One Special, played by Andrew Garfield, a very unhinged individual who has interesting things to say. She basically decides to start filming him as a means of going viral, and obviously it works. There's a montage in here that includes him running around Hollywood Boulevard with a strap-on dildo, and it's insane. A grime song plays over it, which I'm sure has a ton of meaning itself. But as his fame grows and new figures are brought into their lives, Frankie begins questioning the trueness of both Link and their relationship. Link's success leads him to hosting a game show, a literal stage where he brings on contestants played by Casey Fry to wrestle for a new phone or something. Another contestant is played by Alexa Demi from Euphoria. Because of the live nature of the stage, nobody is able to stop Link when he basically forces Alexa's character to post an unedited selfie with her birthmark to her thousands of followers. It obviously traumatizes her and leads to her unfortunate suicide, which is then blamed on Link. Because of this and a whole lot of other things, Maya Hawke decides to puke up emojis for some reason. It's one of the worst shots I've ever seen in a movie ever. Link is essentially canceled, which I'm surprised is a term you don't hear once in the movie, but he continues with his big live performance special that the film has worked up to, and in that performance he preaches about how he didn't kill whatever her name is, but we killed her, the audience, the people watching him, that we as a society are the ones who pushed her into taking her own life, that he shouldn't apologize, that we can't hold him back from saying and doing what he wants. He says fuck you to the crowd. He says fucking watch Coldplay. Crowd goes crazy. He smirks to the camera, and boom, that's the movie. Now, Mainstream is fascinating to me because while what I just described may sound like a dumpster fire of an out-of-touch approach to influencer culture, its absurdity definitely gets somewhere. I also think as someone who technically counts as an influencer, for a lack of a better term, I think I, weirdly enough, am in a unique position to talk about a film that is technically about my job. So I kind of just want to work through that emotionally and try to understand why Mainstream is such a culturally relevant film worth more talk, but it's also incredibly corny. I don't know, let's talk about it. Let's start with the absurdism. If you're gonna praise Mainstream for anything, you should praise it for its absurdity. I think absurdism is hard to come by in films about influencer culture, as films about the subject are consistently trying to talk above what they're talking about, like in a look at how these phones are destroying us kind of way, rather than getting down there in the mess and having some fun with it. The only other film I can kind of look at with the same level of respect is Spree, which is hideous, but in the exact way it should be. But I like how mainstream goes about being weird in that it understands where this weirdness comes from. It's a desire to be seen, or be given attention. I think it's worth looking at the strap-on dildo scene in comparison to the adult baby scene, as they both get at how the film looks at attention and public humiliation. Whereas when Frankie dresses up as a baby, she's still cheered, but not exactly for herself or her work. She's kind of being forced to be put in that position. But when Link prances around Hollywood Boulevard by choice and is eventually arrested, he's met with laughter and filming and eventual success online for just being a freak. That's where a lot of the narcissism that the film tries to explore stems from. The result of being given attention for something like that is the idea that you created that reaction, that your actions that you thought up and your presence was strong enough to elicit some sort of shock. And that's where this movie gets weird and starts to move in an interesting direction that I kind of like. Because that's where Hollywood narcissism differs from this new influencer narcissism. Rather than owing your success to some sort of luck or feeling of being special that agents saw, Coppola instead gets as overt as possible, labeling her character's influencer name as no one special and owing all his success to himself and his own actions. I mean, sure, Frankie and Jake do stuff too, but most of this is just because Link's weird, which really blurs the lines of intent here. Maybe he is aware. Maybe it's better that he doesn't see himself as some prodigy and is able to see through the bullshit. But at the same time, he feeds off the same machine he critiques and gives in the same way most products of the system give in, becoming an egotistical monster responsible for influencing younger audiences in a negative way. Which I guess leads me into this identity existentialism thing that it gets into. There's this really great scene where Link stares in the mirror and has this long moment of trying to figure out what's going on and who he is and what is and isn't real, only for him to pull away at the last second and reveal that he was being filmed the entire time. Which is, you know, wow, so profound. How ironic to talk about reality while being filmed. But for as on the nose as it is, I still think it's one of the more interesting parts of the film, and something I'm glad the film actually takes the time to touch on. Because I think when you get down to it, influencer culture can be damaging to younger audiences, sure, especially when it's Jake Paul or something, but it's not often talked about how this career can negatively affect the individuals themselves. The downside of thriving off your own ridiculous ideas and being trusted to just let loose as a means of building success is that you're turning yourself into a character or a job. And every now and then you're not working, you're not that worker, and to live in the same body as that character can be sort of horrifying. This applies to all kinds of YouTubers or influencers too, not just the Jake Paul types. I myself am a completely different person offline with my friends than I am on here, obviously. And a weird thing I've always struggled with is the fact that my channel is my name. It's weird to look at your own name that you've had your whole life and know that most people associate it with your work or a certain style rather than a person behind it, which is how I view it. I don't think I'm saying anything remotely profound here, but I am saying that I see what this film is trying to say about identity and how that's one of the more serious horrors of being put on a scale and having your raw, authentic self get used like that. Because that's what being an influencer is, after all. It most of the time isn't being recognized for talent, it's being recognized for being interesting, and people want to watch your interesting life. So from that lens, the film ends with this very bizarre performance scene that's just now clicking for me. The whole film has led up to this no one special where Link is giving some live performance for YouTube that apparently involves dancing or something. I know this was more of a thing for YouTube culture back in like 2014 or so, but this is such an outdated thing that would happen now. I'm still not entirely sure what this event is. He's not singing or anything, he just kind of performs and dances and then says things. But in the middle of it, he does this candlelight tribute to Alexa Demi's character. He goes off on the rant I was talking about, and it leaves me so confused because he's like, in some ways, anti-industry, the way he's talking about feeling like he's in a straitjacket, not even just by his manager, but also by his fans, and that being up there speaking freely is where he lets loose. Which is why he's like screaming at them and telling them to F off, because he's finally free and he wants to break loose of this. And then he leaves the stage and you're just like, damn, he just kind of threw it all away. But then they love it. And sure, he's surprised, but he smirks at that. And it just leaves me going, what is this guy's intentions here? I guess the message here is that, yeah, a younger fan base can be easily influenced to a point where they'll obey every word you say, even if it means they hate you. But what stuck with me was that cringeworthy Joker-esque smirk he gives off, which I always thought of as having ill intent, but I think it's instead a mini victory for Link. He basically went out there and left it all out on the table, was his truest self, even if that meant insulting them. It was a cathartic experience for him, I'd imagine, and for them to still accept him after that, he must feel unstoppable. So the moral of the story is to just not be an influencer, I guess. It kind of feels like that, at least. The ending isn't the happiest ending for Link, as it reads like he'll just grow more successful from this now that he's built a fan base that will trust him. And instead of looking for a way out, which is what he seemed to be aiming for, he instead just leans back into a perpetual cycle that he can't escape from. And that's what leaves me wondering, does this movie work? And it does. And it doesn't at the same time. What I find frustrating about this movie is that it's the first to truly get horrific with its depictions of influencer culture, because yeah, it is horrific kind of what's going on. Almost to this meta level by casting Johnny Knoxville and Jake Paul, two landmark figures in this culture. Yes, I'm counting Johnny Knoxville, there's an argument to be made there, but I don't know what exactly it is saying that hasn't already been said. It boils down to internet bad, which, yeah, sure, but what are the lasting effects here? The most crucial parts of this movie are the ones that happened after that smirk, and we didn't really get to see them explored, because I think the real horror with a lot of YouTubers has been explored and can be explored in film now. That real horror is that a lot of them don't experience a crash and burn, but instead a slow, painful descent of viewers growing disinterested, which isn't a bad thing or even their fault, but when your career is based on interest, people are going to just grow disinterested, and if you thrive too hard on validation, that's gonna hurt you. And that's a much more interesting story to be told than a guy runs around naked, guy gets famous, now he's the Joker. So yeah, I don't know. It feels like it says so much, but at the same time really does not offer anything new at all, which is a shame, but you know, it is really entertaining to watch, so they got that going for them. Anyway, just needed to get this stuff off my chest. Thanks for watching. Go watch Mainstream and form your own opinion, and before you head out, please ignore the mustache, and before you head out, I want to give a quick thank you to this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Now, Squarespace, if you didn't already know, is a place where you can go online to build that brand of yours and progress it even further, whether that be through an online store, a blog, a portfolio, you name it. They have a wide array of award-winning designer templates to make whatever that website is look amazing, and if you run into any issues, they have 24-hour customer service to walk you through it. The best part about it all, though, is that if you go to squarespace.com/Karsten, you can get 10% off of your first purchase. It's a fantastic service, and I seriously cannot recommend it enough. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.